Good evening. This is Bible Answers. We're going to be looking at least part of John chapter 19 tonight. All of our verses will be on the screen here so you can follow along. Also, we have a YouTube page. It's North Columbus Church of Christ. And you can find us there, our YouTube page. Also, our website scrolling below me. It's North Columbus Christians. .com, and there you can find out more about us and more about North Columbus Church of Christ. And so we've been working our way through the book of John. We haven't done this in a few weeks, but we're kicking back up, and we're going to look at John chapter 19. So we ended in John chapter 18, and we're getting closer and closer to Christ's crucifixion. We see where the Jews have captured uh, Jesus, and we see the beginnings of a trial. It's more of a sham trial, if you will, and we see where also the Jews are just bent on having Jesus crucified. At the same time, they're willing to have Barabbas, which was an actual criminal, having Barabbas released in lieu of Jesus. And so we see that trial, some of the injustices that were done on that day, and ultimately leads up to why we're still talking about Jesus today. That he died, and he would be resurrected. He would live again, and so we're getting again in John here. We're getting closer and closer, ultimately, to his crucifixion. Crucifixion, and so again, we're in John chapter 19, and we'll look at verses 1 through 6 here. It says, "So then Pilate took Jesus and scourged him, and the soldiers twisted the crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they put on him a purple robe. Then they said, 'Hail, King of the Jews!' And they struck him with their hands. Pilate then went out again and said to them, 'Behold, I am bringing him out to you, that you may know that I find no fault in him.' Then Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. And Pilate said to them, 'Behold the man.' Therefore, when the chief priests and officers saw him, they cried out, saying, 'Crucify him, crucify him.' Pilate said to them, 'You take him and crucify him, for I find no fault in him.'" So, and it's really interesting. I think with how Pilate interacts with Jesus, how he interacts with the Jews, that I think he's torn. He's recognizing. We see at the end of verse 6 that he recognizes that Jesus has done nothing deserving of death. He's not a criminal. But yet we see where, for example, here in verse 1, that he scourges Jesus. Don't know why. Maybe he's trying to get something. Maybe he thinks by doing this, Jesus might admit to some crime. But again, we see at the end of all this, even though he does these things, he still recognizes that Jesus is not a criminal. So again, I think what we see here is Pilate's trying to. He understands the I guess you would say who Jesus really is, and by saying that I mean not a criminal, but at the same time being or wanting to keep the Jews happy, and so and also being keeping the we definitely don't want to get the Roman Empire on our bad side as well, and so I think Pilate here is really just acting like a politician, and again doing things that really just it does not make sense. It's contrary to what he thinks about Jesus, and so he takes him, he scourges him. We see how the soldiers are treating Jesus as well, but we see that they are so in chapter 18 we see where Jesus talks about being a king. He of course he talks about not being an earthly king, that his kingdom is not here, that it's somewhere else, and so it's like the soldiers here are kind of going along with this idea of him being a king, that in lieu of a real crown, they take this crown of thorns and put it on his head. Obviously, this is to torment him. I think probably a lot of you that listen have scratched or poked themselves with thorns that can be very painful. Okay. And so this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to inflict pain on him, but they also put on him a purple robe. Okay. So they put him in this robe. They have this mock crown. They say, "Hail, King of the Jews." And of course, they're doing this in a mocking manner. It says they're also striking him with their hands. And so, very bad mistreatment, to say the least, as to what's going on here. Again, this has been a sham trial from the beginning. They can't really find anything against Jesus. They will make claims, but not, again, not anything deserving of death. They will, of course, the Jews will make that claim, but again, that's we see nothing against Roman law. And so Pilate goes out again. We see he says, "Behold, I am bringing him out to you that you may know that I find no fault in him." Again, Pilate saying Jesus is innocent. They want Pilate to crucify him for them, but he finds no fault in them. And so Jesus then comes out. He tells them, "Behold the man." And notice what the Jews say. And these are the chief priests and the officers here. And they're all saying to crucify him. Okay. So they want him crucified. They want Pilate to do this. Pilate, again, he says he finds no fault in him. And then he says, "You take him and crucify him, for I find no fault in him." And it's really interesting here that he's basically giving it to them. He said, "Y'all handled this." When we see throughout, and we'll see later on throughout his crucifixion, that the Roman government is involved with this. They are the ones crucifying him. But we see where Pilate is just trying to wash his hands of this whole thing, that he does not want to be blamed for what is happening here. But at the same time, he is not wanting to tell the Jews, "You stop it. This man is not going to be crucified." So he's kind of being a fence rider here, here involving Jesus and the Jews. So going on to verses 7 through 12, it says, "The Jews answered him, 'We have a law, and according to our law, he ought to die because he made himself the Son of God.' Therefore, when Pilate heard that saying, he was the more afraid, and went again into the praetorium and said to Jesus, 'Where are you from?' But Jesus gave him no answer. Then Pilate said to him, 'Are you not speaking to me? Do you not know that I have power to crucify you and power to release you?' Jesus answered, 'You could have no power at all against me unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, the one who delivered me to you has the greater sin.' But then on Pilate sought to release him, but the Jews cried out, saying, 'If you let this man go, you are not Caesar's friend. Whoever makes himself a king speaks against Caesar.' So the Jews levy their claim against Jesus here. He's made himself the Son of God, which I cannot remember whether this is said in John's uh, epistle here, or gospel, or in other gospels. But when he makes himself to be the Son of God, the Jews recognize as he is making himself as being equal with God. So he is claiming to be equal with God. He is claiming to be God by making this claim. And they're saying, according to this law, he ought to die. That no man can be doing this. And so we see that they don't recognize him as a Messiah. They recognize him as worthy to die according to their law. But again, this is not a problem according to the Roman law. Now, when Pilate hears this, notice what he's more afraid. He goes in and asks Jesus, "Where are you from?" And I don't know. I don't. And I'd have to go back and look. And I don't think there's anything that really specifies as to why he's afraid. But you think about somebody that's making this claim, that it would be, I think, at minimum, cause for some concern. And so that someone who is claiming this, and if he really is this, he has great power and great authority. And so Pilate here, he's wanting to clear this up. He get asked, "Where are you from?" Jesus doesn't respond. And we see Pilate's response to that. He said, "Do you not know that I have power to crucify you and power to release you? I have your life in my hands. You need to tell me where you're from. You need to give me some information." And so Jesus' response, it doesn't really say, well, in a way, he's saying where he's from. He does not really spell it out precisely, but he says, "You could have no power at all against me unless it has been given you from above." Okay. And so the only way that Pilate would be able to crucify Jesus, to kill Jesus, was if that was if the power above allowed that to happen. And so again, gives us some insight as really, in a way, answering that question as to where Jesus is from, claiming that he's a king. Again, in John chapter 18, he would talk about this idea, talking about who he is. And so he says that the one who delivered me to you has the greater sin. Okay. So Pilate's not guiltless here, but he says the greater sin, the ones who are more guilty, are the Jews. Okay. They're going to be the ones that bear, really, they're the most responsible for this. And we see that in the book of Acts. I believe Peter or one of the other apostles will make that statement that hey, y'all killed him. The Jews killed him. You're responsible for this. Now, recognizing again, Pilate, he has power to release him or not. So Pilate does bear responsibility as well. But the Jews bear responsibility too. So Pilate, after that, he seeks to release him. Okay. So again, works to release him. But why would he not do that? It was because of the Jews. The Jews cried out, "If you let this man go, you are not Caesar's friend." This is real interesting here with the Jews because the Jews are not Caesar's friend. They are not friendly with the Romans. They are the subjects of the Romans. They don't want to be ruled by them. So they're not Caesar's friend. They don't want anything to do with him. But in this case, they're using Caesar to try to force Pilate to crucify him, and saying that if you don't crucify him, this man who's made himself a king, okay, so he claims that earlier that he's a son of God. Then they go back and reference what he said earlier about him being a king, and they're saying if he has made himself a king, he's also speaking against Caesar. Now again, Pilate recognizes and would have understood that Jesus was pretty clear that he's not planning on making a kingdom here on earth. So he's not at odds with Caesar. He's not trying to overrule Caesar. But the Jews here are trying to push and pressure Pilate in order to crucify him. Really, just doing whatever they can to get him to be crucified. And so you see the manipulation of the Jews at this point, and just doing. I mean, really, we see him being treated as a common criminal. Pilate recognizes that he's done nothing wrong, yet he still allows Jesus to be beat, mistreated. Pilate scourges him as well, and then we see that he allows himself to be pressured by the Jews in order to crucify Jesus. And so we move on to verses 13 through 16. It says, when Pilate therefore heard that saying, he brought Jesus out and sat down in the judgment seat in the place that is called the pavement, but in Hebrew, Gabbatha. Now it was the preparation day of the Passover, and about the 6th hour. And he said to the Jews, "Behold your king." But they cried out, away with him, crucify him." Pilate said to them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king but Caesar." Then he delivered him to them to be crucified. Then they took Jesus and led him away. So Pilate, we see where it seems like Pilate is taunting the Jews here a little bit. He says, "Behold your king." We know that that would just really dig on the Jews if they are if one is pushing that Jesus is their king. Now that is true. Okay. Which is also interesting here. He is their king. He is the king of really the faithful as well. But yet we see that the Jews here want nothing to do with him, and Pilate is making these statements. I think to really to dig on them. He's saying this in a sarcastic manner. Tells them, "Behold your king." What did the Jews want? They want him to be crucified. Get him away with him. Pilate responds, "Shall I crucify your king?" And notice what they say. And these are the chief priests here. They say, "We have no king but Caesar." And again, that is another interesting statement, because I don't think, and if you're familiar with that time period, again, the Jews are no friend of the Romans. The Jews are basically just, they're subjects, they're tolerating Roman rule. They they wouldn't really have anything to do with Caesar. They wouldn't really say anything like this. But they, at this point, they are getting really, really, I don't know what the right word is. They're getting really close with Caesar. That they here are using this idea of Caesar's rule over them again to get Pilate pressured in order to get Jesus crucified. He is not our king. Our king is Caesar. Okay. And so then finally, we see after all this, again, Pilate recognizes that Jesus is innocent. He delivered him to them to be crucified. So he lets them do that. And again, Pilate is not guiltless. The Romans are not guiltless here. We see that they're all involved here. But the Jews are the main driving force as to why Jesus is crucified. So then it says that they took Jesus and led him away. And it takes us to verses 17 through 22. It says, "And he, bearing his cross, went out to a place called the place of a skull, which is in Hebrew Golgotha, where they crucified him, and two others with him, one on either side, and Jesus in the center. Now Pilate wrote a title and put it on the cross, and the writing was Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. Then many of the Jews read this title, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. Therefore the chief priests of the Jews said to Pilate, 'Do not write the King of the Jews, but he said, I am the King of the Jews.' Pilate answered, 'What I have written, I have written.'" So Jesus has been beaten, he's been scourged, he has a crown of thorns. He is not, and we don't read a lot about his condition here in these segment of scriptures, but Jesus is in bad shape here. Okay. Uh, and so not only is he in very, very bad shape physically, now that he's being crucified, now he is having to bear his cross. We read elsewhere where he's not able to actually bear that cross the full way. Somebody's there to having to help him. But we see where they take him to this place, Golgotha. It says they crucify him. And so we have two others with him. These two others would be criminals, okay? And we have Jesus in the center. So there's three people being crucified. Jesus is with them. He's in the midst of these criminals, people that are justly being punished. And then we have Jesus here. And notice what Pilate writes. He says, he writes his title and puts it on the cross. It says, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." We see the Jews' response to this. That again, they don't like this. They don't want him to be seen as King of the Jews. But yet we see where many of the Jews read the title. Okay, they were near the city. Many Jews would have read this, and so they don't like it. They don't want him described as a king of the Jews, but rather they want it described as he said. He made the claim, the king of the Jews, and so writing it in this manner is just stating it as a fact, and again it just eats up the Jews here, the chief priests here. And we notice Pilate's response. He says, "What I have written, I have written." And it seems at this point that Pilate's just he's done with the Jews. That he's appeased them enough. This man who is not deserving. This is an injustice. I believe Pilate would recognize this as an injustice, and yet he still is involved with this. Okay, he writes this. Okay, so they're again. I've said this before, but the Pilate and the Jews. They both hold some responsibility. But remember what Jesus said earlier: the ones that have delivered me to you, they hold the greater sin. That this is primarily the Jews doing. And so again, we see where he's just. It seems looks like he's just kind of fed up with them, and he says, "You're just going to have to accept this. What I put on there, that's it. We're not going to change it." And so that's where we're going to end off tonight. Again, just grave injustice, any sham trial, mock trial, a man who is punished for doing no crime, a government that recognizes that he has done no crime, yet still allows him to be punished by that, and not just slapped on the wrist. He's going to die. Even while he is innocent. Okay. And so we see at this point I, we're at the not quite the climax of John here, but we're right at the the pinnacle again of why we're talking about Jesus today, that he is going to die, and we're also going to see later where even though he does die, he is resurrected. The death does not have power over him. And we need to recognize what his death accomplished. That his death, his blood that was shed, had to happen so that men can have their sins forgiven. Okay. So even though this was terrible situation, it was injustice, it was also necessary for men to have their sins forgiven. And we don't need to forget that. And we don't need to take those things lightly. And so we're going to stop there. We'll finish up next time. We'll look at the end of John chapter 19. And we're getting closer and closer to finishing the book of John. And I don't know what we're going to do after that. But we'll probably start another book. But it's always a hope that this has been useful for those that will watch this. And if you got any questions or comments, leave them. I'll try to respond to them. And so until next time, I hope that you all have a good day and a good rest of the week. Thanks.